I've always been an avid cyclist. There's a certain freedom that comes with pedaling down open roads, the world blurring past in a symphony of sights and sounds. Night rides in particular have always held a special allure for me. The cool air, the quiet streets, the solitude. But after what happened last month, I don't think I'll ever ride at night again. It was a Friday evening, and the city had been gripped by an unexpected heat wave. The day had been stifling, the air thick and oppressive. As evening approached, dark clouds gathered, promising a much-needed reprieve in the form of rain. By 9 p.m. the heavens opened, releasing a torrential downpour. Most people would have stayed indoors, but for me, it was the perfect opportunity. The rain would cool the air, and the streets would be deserted. A cyclist's dream. I geared up, donning my waterproof jacket and mounting my trusty bike. The city was transformed under the rain. Streets gleamed under the lamplight, and the usual cacophony was replaced by the rhythmic patter of raindrops. I set off, relishing the sensation of the cool rain against my skin and the slick roads beneath my tires. I decided to take my usual route, a loop that took me through the city centre, past the old cathedral, and into the outskirts where the buildings thinned and gave way to open fields. Everything was going smoothly. The rain had driven everyone indoors, and I had the roads to myself. As I approached the outskirts, the city lights dimmed, and the surroundings grew darker. The only illumination came from the sporadic street lights and the weak beam of my bike's headlamp. It was then that I noticed another cyclist ahead of me. This was unusual. I rarely encountered anyone on my night rides, especially in such weather. The cyclist was moving slowly, almost leisurely. He wore a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up, obscuring his face. His bike was old, the kind you'd find at a garage sale, with a rusty frame and squeaky wheels. There were no lights on his bike, making him almost invisible in the rain. I called out as I approached, "On your left," but there was no response. He didn't even acknowledge my presence. I shrugged it off, thinking he might have headphones on. As I overtook him, I glanced sideways, hoping to catch a glimpse of his face or get a nod of acknowledgement. But what I saw made my blood run cold. Under the hood, he was wearing a mask, a grotesque, grinning Joker mask with wild, exaggerated features and smeared, distorted makeup. The eyes behind the mask were hidden in shadow, but I could feel his gaze, cold and unsettling, piercing through the darkness. I almost lost control of my bike, swerving slightly before regaining my balance. My heart pounded in my chest, and I told myself it was just some weirdo playing a prank, but the unease lingered. I increased my speed, eager to put distance between us. The rain intensified, and the world around me seemed to blur. After a few minutes, I dared to glance back. To my horror, the cyclist was right behind me, matching my speed effortlessly. The Joker's grin seemed to widen as he drew closer, his presence more menacing with each pedal stroke. Panic set in. I pedaled harder, my legs burning with effort. The road ahead led into a dense patch of woods, a shortcut that would shave off a good 10 minutes from my route. I took it, hoping to lose him among the trees. The path was narrow and winding, the canopy above shielding me from the worst of the rain but plunging the surroundings into deeper darkness. My headlamp flickered, struggling to cut through the gloom. Every so often, I'd hear the faint squeak of his bike behind me, unwavering and relentless. Suddenly, my front tire hit something, a rock or a branch. I couldn't tell. I lost control, skidding and crashing onto the muddy path. Pain shot through my leg, and I groaned, trying to assess the damage. My bike's chain had come off, and my knee was scraped and bleeding. Then I heard it. The squeaking had stopped. Silence enveloped me, broken only by the soft drumming of rain on leaves. I looked around, but the darkness was impenetrable. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. No response. Gathering my courage, I fixed the chain, my hands shaking. I needed to get out of there. As I mounted my bike, ready to pedal away, a whisper cut through the silence, right by my ear. "Going somewhere?" I screamed, adrenaline surging through me. I took off, pedaling as fast as I could, ignoring the pain in my leg. Branches whipped past me, and the path blurred under my wheels. I didn't dare look back. After what felt like an eternity, I burst out of the woods, the city lights welcoming me like beacons. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment, bursting through the door and collapsing on the floor, drenched and trembling. I never saw the masked cyclist again, but that night haunts me. I've tried to rationalize it, a prankster trying to scare someone, but deep down, I know what I saw wasn't just a person. It was something else, something malevolent. Now, every time it rains, I feel a chill run down my spine, and I stay indoors, curtains drawn, hoping to never encounter that Joker's grin again. It was supposed to be a quick ride, just a few miles to clear my head after a long day at work. The forecast had mentioned rain, but I figured I'd be back before it hit. I've always loved the feeling of the cool night air rushing past as I glide through the empty streets. But that night, something was different. I set off just as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky turning a deep shade of purple. The streets were quiet, almost too quiet, and a strange stillness hung in the air. I ignored it, focusing on the rhythm of my pedaling and the steady beat of my breath. I decided to take a different route than usual, one that wound through a less familiar part of town. It was a longer path, but I figured it would give me more time to unwind. As I rode, the first drops of rain began to fall, dotting the pavement with dark spots. I pulled up my hood and kept going, thinking I could outrun the worst of the storm. The rain picked up quickly, turning into a steady downpour that blurred my surroundings. The streetlights cast eerie halos in the mist, and I found myself straining to see more than a few feet ahead. I was deep in thought when I noticed a fork in the road I hadn't seen before. Without thinking, I took the left path, feeling a strange pull in that direction. The road narrowed as I continued, the buildings thinning out until I was surrounded by dense trees on either side. The pavement was slick under my tires and I had to slow down to avoid skidding. That's when I realized something was off. This road didn't look like any I'd seen on my previous rides. It felt wrong, somehow, like it didn't belong. I told myself I was being paranoid and kept going, but the uneasy feeling grew stronger with each pedal stroke. The rain pounded harder, drumming on my helmet and turning the road into a river of water and mud. My headlight flickered, struggling to stay on in the storm. As I rounded a bend, I saw a figure standing in the middle of the road, illuminated by the faint beam of my light. They were drenched, clothes clinging to their body, head bowed. I slowed down, heart racing, unsure whether to stop or keep going. They didn't move as I approached, just stood there like a statue, their back turned to me. I stopped a few feet away, the rain pouring down around us. "Hey, are you okay?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. No response. Something in my gut told me to leave, but I couldn't just abandon someone who might need help. I inched closer, the hair on the back of my neck standing on end. That's when they slowly turned to face me. Their face was hidden by the shadow of their hood, but I could see their eyes, wide, unblinking, and filled with something I couldn't quite place. Fear? No, more like anger, or maybe both. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my ears. Without a word, they pointed down the road, their hand trembling slightly. I looked in the direction they were pointing, but all I saw was more darkness. When I turned back, they were gone, vanished into thin air, as if they'd never been there at all. Panic surged through me, and I hopped back on my bike, pedaling as fast as I could. The road seemed to stretch on forever, the rain blurring everything into a grey haze. My mind raced with questions. Who were they? What were they trying to show me? Finally, I saw lights in the distance, a small town, glowing like a beacon in the night. Relief washed over me, and I pushed myself harder, desperate to get away from that road. As I reached the town's outskirts, the rain began to let up, the storm easing into a light drizzle. I pulled into a gas station, breathing hard, my clothes soaked through. The clerk behind the counter gave me a strange look as I stumbled in, shivering. I tried to explain what had happened, but the words stuck in my throat. Later, when I had calmed down, I looked up the area on my phone, trying to figure out where I'd gone, but no matter how hard I searched, I couldn't find that road on any map. It was like it didn't exist. I haven't been back on that route since. Something about that night changed me, made me question what's out there on those lonely roads in the dark. I still ride, but only in daylight, and I never, ever take the wrong turn.